Well, it's the spooky season again, and you all know that I can't resist the opportunity to drift back into talking about horror games. So every September I start to paw through the spooky scary games I have in my various collections, and blowing past all of the games I've been interested in for years now or have meant to cover on this channel in one form or another, I found myself most intrigued by a game from this year, simply titled Inside. Now, I think I hear some eyebrows raising ever so slightly amongst my viewers as I drop that title, and I guess I can understand why. It's not really the kind of game that gives off the look and smell of a horror title. It's a puzzle game, right? A kinda creepy, slightly spooky puzzle game. Like Limbo. In truth, I'm not sure Limbo or Inside are really carried by the description, it's a horror game, in any serious way. But Limbo did manage to achieve some pretty effective feelings of hopelessness through isolation. Not to mention hitting the phobic route pretty hard. I know arachnophobes who straight up refuse to play Limbo. Creepy stuff. But last year, in my Darkest Dungeon video, I posited that horror, when used as an objective rather than a style or genre designation, can come from just about anywhere when it's applied properly. Playdead has definitely flirted with this before in Limbo, though I'm not really sure I ever got there, as it were, when I played the game back then, but Inside turned out to be exactly the kind of game I look for when I do these month of horror videos every October. Yeah, I got kind of freaked out by a puzzle game. A kinda creepy, slightly spooky puzzle game. The first thing I see when I look at Inside in relation to what most people label as a horror game today is the lack of pageantry. There's no illusions in Inside. The game isn't fooling us into forgetting that we are tied to a controller, mouse, or keyboard. There's no tapestry around us making us feel immersed precisely so they can compromise that immersion. The horror genre thrives on putting blinders on us while everything gets up close and personal. Inside, however, puts everything on display, and we are far removed from the action on the screen. The extent of how we can move is obvious. We can go left or right, we can swim, we can jump, we can pull or push stuff. We aren't getting that up-close and personal view of everything that's happening. There's no dialogue to create spooky context. There aren't even any named characters in this game. So where's the power? What makes me want to put this game in league with the other horror titles that I've covered or that I love from over the years? Well, the game pulls off the isolation angle quite nicely. In this case, it's accomplished while being surrounded by other thinking human beings, which just makes it so much stronger in my mind. There's the phobic route again as well. The visuals of the game just scream agoraphobia. There are lots of deep water swimming sections, very blatant steps towards drowning, being chased by hostile agents, being chased by attack dogs. That one got to me pretty swiftly. These were the bits of the game that made it tense or troubling to be in moment to moment, but I actually found the game appealing to a sort of obscure pseudophobia I recognized in myself, wherein it started working its way into dreams I've had, and even briefly made me question my own humanity. Yeah, it was heavy. The game gives me an impression that what I know of as home, as in the place that I came from or where I reside, is gone, and that even if I wanted to turn around, there's nothing to go back to. For me, this begins right where the game gets started. We find ourselves pursued by armed individuals without explanation. They have set guard dogs on us and will shoot on sight if given the opportunity. Not once is it explained why this is happening, creating vast sweeping unknowns which sets up the terror right away. Something has happened and we are being chased. Doesn't matter why, it's just happening. Everyone is against us, and anytime we see car headlights off in the distance, it's not help on the way, it's more trouble. Now, I will admit that the game takes on a bit of a different direction when we make it further into the game and deeper into the lab setting, and when we make it to the stuff that I'm probably not supposed to spoil, I guess. But during most of the game, even though we're directed to be running towards something, as in the game is built that way, I could never shake the feeling that turning back would only reveal a home, lying in ruins. Nowhere to go back to. Everywhere we go is danger and hostility. People want to kill us for seemingly no reason. I've had dreams like this. If all of that wasn't enough, once we get our first glance of the faceless marching millions, an endless line of people void of identities being herded in droves to a fate that is ill-defined but ominous nonetheless, the tension for me is turned up to 11. This is when the weight of whatever story this game has lands squarely on our shoulders. The full extent of the collapse of a familiar world is on display here, presented for our consideration, and in terms of my consideration, I was terrified. Not the cold sweat, losing my mind kind of terrified, more of a real realization, affirming of a truth already suspected. The world as we know it is over, and the game's silent regard makes it a malleable and accessible apocalypse that no matter your political leanings, no matter who you are afraid of or what you were personally running from in the beginning of this game, here is where it all lands as you bear tragic witness to a world simply compromised. The progress of the game then demands that you take a turn flying under the radar, living briefly in the constrictions of your new dystopia. What was once fluid and relatively open gameplay is now demanding and finicky, restrictive to within inches of movement and timing. The oppressive nature of this section of the game killed off the last bit of any hope I might have had while playing. It's a setting that is basically a baited trap, waiting to send my brain whirling back to the theory classes and philosophy discussions that peppered my last few years of university. Forced ubiquitous conformity is always a topic that gets me asking questions to nobody in particular and finding the opposite of answers, running to ruminations on symbolic interactionism and dramatism. If you're unfamiliar with these philosophies, it's okay, I mostly am too. I came across them late in my university career, so yeah, my overvocal undergrad philosophy minor credentials are nice and intact, so if you'll excuse me, I need to go buy an acoustic guitar and play Wonderwall at every party I ever go to. But Oasis jam sessions aside, it's at this point in the game when I start to think about reality as a constructed representation of our upbringing and experiences, lacking inherent meaning in of itself without the presence of a subjective viewpoint. How what we are is one point on an infinite list of things that we are not. How this moment of the game is such a blatant allegory for our own social hierarchy held in place by symbol creators ensuring our continuing redemption of innate guilt. Now, I know this all sounds kind of nihilistic, if you will, and I do understand that not everybody looks for this sort of thing when they're, playing a video game. But I have always maintained that if a game can make me think, then it's a win. And as you can probably see, the game made me think. But wouldn't you know it, if the game doesn't go one step further and pull me right back down into reality. Following the frantic spiral of my thinking during the March portion of the game, I found myself coming to a similar revelation, albeit a much more somber, collected one, when I entered the sonic weapons testing ground. To me, this is when the running from a ruined home motif took hold of me, and in fact might have been the moment of reflection that led me to that feeling in the first place. I can't think of a much more foreign environment to find oneself in, face to face with an emptied world laid out before us, reduced to being host to weapons tests that will vaporize you if you're not perfectly careful, waiting patiently for us to destroy ourselves.
I could almost hear the game laughing at me for having put so much thought into it up until now.
Home is gone, but maybe it doesn't matter where we came from, only that we are here now. From here, the game goes on to touch on a few additional areas of thought or theme, but never losing its sense of ever-present melancholy, struggling against the inevitable. Even the game's lighter moments, including its rather controversial ending, carry a strong statement about how nothing will ever be the same after this, and that peace of being can only be found by refusing to dwell in the past and accepting what comes our way. Inside is a short but pointed game. There is a real need to make itself known, even if the finer points of the story have been left out or left up to interpretation. I would be very interested to get into the heads of the designers in this case, because of course mine is only a singular interpretation of a game that I think will grip players for very much their own reasons. I love it when the real weight of a piece of art takes place in the mind of the audience, and this game, it's got some real weight to it. It's a real heavy hitter.